All right, good evening, everyone. So this is our January meeting. We haven't seen you all since November because in December we typically have a holiday party. We aired on the side of there's a lot of Zoom going around, so maybe we didn't need to have a Zoom holiday party. So I'm sorry we didn't see you in December, but we are happy to see you all to start the new year. Um, I shared with people that I apologize. I'm going to try. I think I'm just going to stay with you all because I can't figure out how to make Vanilla the host. Our and this is going to segue into something we have on our agenda later. But our working session for the state board got moved at the last minute to this evening from yesterday because y'all know what happened yesterday. So we wanted to first, like, yeah, welcome people and just take some time to see if anyone had any thoughts or reflections or needed a space um, to comment on what happened yesterday. Anyone who doesn't feel like it was comedy, like Kareem suggested earlier, we want to give space to that because we do appreciate that you all joined us today and that this is not normal, to say the least. So I will stop talking. I hope it's not too awkward of a silence. Um, but I want to give space in case anyone wanted to jump in or comment.
I just have to say, so good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. Something that did help me sort of process my anger, if you will. I
The
typically,
risk of what got Malcolm in trouble, it seemed like a whole lot of chickens coming home to roost.
I typically would, use humor to sort of get through, if you will, because yesterday was very tough. But if you haven't looked at Black Twitter, please do. Just go to Twitter and look up hashtag Black Twitter, and you will definitely be in a different place. So that's all I have to say.
Sharona, I appreciate that. Twitter is not as dark a place as people think. It brings me joy. Um, I will also say that in case you missed it, we are taking suggestions if anyone wants a future background music playlist as we wait for these meetings to start. Please put suggestions in the chat because we'll save them. Um, and I think we're going to be virtual for at least a few more months. So hopefully you'll see your requests. Um, anybody else?
Yeah, well, I just think as a Black person living in the United States, not having grown up here but now living here, um, I think I think white privilege is so destructive to the psyche in the way that it manifests. And yesterday was like the epitome of white privilege being manifested. And even in the president who's in the White House, nobody of a different color could get away with what this man has done over 4 years. And he actually incited, um, sedition and treason yesterday. And they still are debating, well, maybe we got 14 more days. Maybe we don't have to remove that man like yesterday. And it can be done. You have the 25th Amendment, it can be done. And if Pence doesn't do it, let the Congress figure out a way to do it. He does not belong in that office one more minute. So you could see I'm still like, I just can't believe it. It's because, see, this country looks at third world countries and talks about them and downplay. And what did we see on display yesterday? What happens in third world countries with dictators all the time? That's what happened yesterday in the United States of America. And white privilege caused it. So that's all I'm going to say.
Vanilla, I appreciate you. And you said a lot. I mean, I'm angry. I was so angry yesterday, I couldn't breathe, y'all. Like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't function. One of my, yeah, some of you know, like I have three younger sisters. One of my sisters lives pretty close to like downtown DC. She lives not too far from Dunbar. Now, what people don't realize is that it's not like people just randomly showed up yesterday and then went home. Like so many of her neighbors have like Airbnb their houses and everything else. So like those people that you saw are like in her neighborhood. And we could not get in contact with her. And I was so like I had so many different feelings that I couldn't function. Now I don't think they're gonna come. I've never felt unsafe where I am in the city. But the fact that like I had to even have that thought process was so maddening to me. And to feel like there was nothing that our local leadership could really do about it. Like they didn't have all the tools at their disposal, and that our national leadership caused it was like infuriating. I am also someone who I've been kind of not trying to get too upset when people say to me that they're shocked or this is not who we are. I think it's kind of like, and I don't have a better way to say it, but like, this is absolutely who we've been as a country. It's not so much that I appreciate the comparisons to Black Lives Matter and saying like, okay, well, if they were protesting, but it's not at all the same. Because it wasn't a protest. Like it wasn't even like a riot feels insufficient. Like that was an act of war. They occupied our capital. Let's be clear. Black Lives Matter has never done that, has never tried to do that. That was never their intent. So that's insufficient. Second, because state sanctioned violence has a history of being okay to further white supremacy in America, period. Like if you can't in one breath like celebrate Georgia and the fact that we no longer have voter suppression, which is absolutely an attack on democracy, and at the same time say like, I'm surprised this happening. This is who we are. Like we've done this over and over, and it is absolutely state sanctioned. And so I've been just super I've had so many feelings, but I think it's treason. I think it's state sanctioned, and I have been so frustrated and feeling like there were people who I care about who were unsafe because we don't want to admit like who we are as a country or do anything about it. I see Rebecca has her hand up.
Hey, I kind of use, like, I didn't feel scared or anything because it is what it is. White people can do things that we already know that we can never do. But I used it as an opportunity today for the students who came in. I teach like 5th grade, and they said they felt bad for the woman who died. And I said, the woman who crawled through the Capitol window and got shot. I was like, you do know that's something you can't do, right? That's something, we're like, I'm teaching Black students as well. All that stuff you've seen, that's you would be able to do, right? Automatic, like death sentence for a lot of us. The even thought of is even just sitting down on the Capitol. You know how it's kind of terrifying just sitting down on the Capitol steps because just so many police officers with their gun raised up. Just to see people just rush in through, it's almost like it's not allowed. And then I opened up the conversation of there's certain things that when in our society that others can do, but you can't. And then I raised with me having the background of growing up in Virginia in my elementary and middle school years, and I grew up in Fairfax County, there were certain things even within that system as a child, I would get in trouble just off the mere fact, like my white friends were talking, or if they were doing something that was like, let's say if they went out to the grocery store and they stole something and I had nothing to do with it, I would get in trouble for their actions because somehow it'll be twisted up to like, you told them to do it. somehow it'll twist up that somehow I'm always responsible for the bad things that would be happening to whatever my white friends would be doing, even though it's their idea. They all did that stuff on their own. They even admit that it was them who did it on their own. Somehow you would always get in trouble. So I use that opportunity to let them know that, hey, this is the America that we live in, and there's certain things that you can't do. So just be very careful about the decisions that you make and who's around you, because it's the decisions you make can be life threatening. So I just use that as a tool. I didn't feel threatened. Like, my life don't feel threatened because somebody downtown is doing something, because, living in the city, downtown is downtown, and we live far from that. So it is what it is.
I'm on mute. Duh. I saw Marla, and then I saw Philip.
Two things. One, first of all, I don't think yesterday was white privilege. I think it's much stronger than that. I think it was white supremacy, and I think it should be called white supremacy. They carried Confederate flags throughout the Capitol. They raised the Trump flag and they lowered the American flag. So that's the kind of things that happen in insurrections. And so it was an attempted insurrection that was eventually suppressed. The other piece of that is, I want you to know, they were in our neighborhood. They were in Southeast. They were walking across the Sousa Bridge. So I think for us to think that they did not, they were here. Early in the morning, if you know anything about me, I go and get coffee every morning at 6 o'clock in Capitol Hill, and I drive down Pennsylvania. And my husband and I he went with me that morning just in case, because I was going to Capitol Hill. And there was a contingency of them who were walking across the Sousa Bridge at 6 o'clock in the morning. So they were in our community and other people saw them. So, but it doesn't even matter if they were or if they weren't. The fact of the matter is that they could have done, and they did do damage in other places besides just downtown. And so what we experienced yesterday was an attempted coup. As a former government teacher, it was definitely an insurrection. Some people will debate technically if it's treason, because you're supposed to be in a active war for it to technically be treason. But it was definitely un-American, unpatriotic, and it was reprehensible. And the disparity between how peaceful protests, had that been Black people doing that, Black Lives Matter, or any group of Black people, they would have been killed. If it would have been Muslims, we can imagine how they would have been treated. They would have been sniped. So it was to see the gates open and the Capitol Police all but welcome them in so many ways. And the pictures we're seeing, heads need to roll. And then what was most disappointing to me above all that was that even after Congress people had to cower in under their seats, they still voted for it. That was the most shameful part of it, that they still voted for it. Some people changed their mind, but still well over 100 of our Congress people voted for it. That's the true shame.
I think Philip was next.
Hello, everybody. My name is Philip. I just, yesterday was just 400 years plus history that just manifested its ugly face in front of everybody. It personally, I couldn't function yesterday. I had to take space away from my two kids because I did not want them to see me in that type of capacity. Like it was a spit in the face, and I can imagine, like, I'm in my 30s. I can imagine those who endured more before me. Like, it's a spit in the face to all the how careful you are when you interact with law enforcement, how careful you are when navigating through the city and stuff. And then just to see these people come from out of state, come into and just like no regard to law, everything that they've been exercising and preaching forever, how long, and they're just going to come in and you add on top of it in the middle of a pandemic. So Lord knows the impact that's going to have on super spreader event, whatever in the district. But today I was able to find a little bit more peace. And it really came from coworkers working with and just progress on some projects, but then also just hearing about excellent work some of our youth is doing around the district, just organizing, mobilizing, trying to support and help one another, initiatives in education, initiatives just as far as law enforcement. And it's just a reminder, seeing the results yesterday in Georgia, seeing the power of locally organizing, seeing the impact. I think it was the Atlanta Dream, the WNBA team that kind of catapulted this whole movement in Georgia. It lays a blueprint going forward that makes me feel optimistic. And then seeing how the youth is really taking the torch in a way that when I was their age, I wasn't thinking about whatsoever. So as angry, frustrated I get right now thinking about it, I somehow feel more optimistic just based on seeing the work and then being in these meetings right here and future meetings around the city, around the country are going to be needed to really fortify our communities and make sure that we're good. And it's just showed us, can't wait on other people to help us. We got the resources to really build for ourselves. And how can we really, really, really do that without the dependency of someone else who doesn't care about us?
Thank you. Is there anyone else who had thoughts or wanted to jump in? Going once, going twice. All right. Thank you. I don't know if that was helpful for people. I know that like being in the pandemic, there's a lot of isolation. And so we thought it was appropriate that like if at the very least you all were taking the time and energy to join us, we wanted to create that space for people who needed it. So thank you all. We are going to jump into our business. We don't have a bunch of business. We do have a guest joining us, which is Councilmember Henderson. The first item for business is actually Laura, which is our secretary, because like I said, we haven't seen each other since November. So she just wanted to, we need to share out our meeting minutes, and they are from November. They're not from December because we did not meet in December. So I will turn it over to Laura.
We had this problem last time. I don't know why, for some reason, I can't just drop them in the chat so everyone can see them. So I will display them. In November, we had some guest speakers, President Elizabeth Davis of the Washington Teachers Union, who answered questions on reopening. I don't know if I should just leave it up so people can read it, or
how about we take a moment, like give it like, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute. Let's just say a minute for people to read. And then we can scroll down and then we can take some questions if people have them.
And some more Q&A.
So Kareem, I see you in the chat. I muted everyone because I couldn't do the breathing. Can people put things in the chat because I can't?
Sorry, yeah. So LSAT is local school advisory team, which every public school has or has the right to have one, made up of educators voted on by the WTU and parents and a community member. And PERB is the Public Employee Relations Board, who the WTU, when we had a dispute with DCPS around a workplace survey, we sued them and brought them to the PERB, who decided that the WTU was correct and that DCPS had violated the law in issuing that survey without negotiating with our union. And I think the other big acronym in there is MOA, which is the Memoranda of Agreement that W2 and DCPS were negotiating.
I saw a reference to Amy Mastera.
Mastera, did I misspell it?
No. I just didn't read it. Okay. A schedule? Oh, really? Okay.
I don't know any details beyond what President Davis shared in the meeting.
Thank you. Okay, that's interesting.
Are there other questions about the minutes for people who and I think most of you all were following, I'm assuming, the reopening conversations. A lot of this was around the time that they made the decision they were going to move forward opening school again, and then this last time that DCPS had to go back to the drawing board. They have opened up care classrooms since then, because this was, what, 2 months ago. 2 months feels like 22 years in pandemic time. All right. Seeing no further questions in the chat, we will make sure, as we have been doing since the pandemic started, that when we send out our next update email, to include the minutes so people can have them in the update email, which answers Allison's question, that we'll send it out via email. Other questions? All right, going once, twice. All right, moving on. The next thing we had, as far as like new business for us, like, people know that I'm now the state board member for Ward 7. I think there's a couple things that people don't know. One is that according to our bylaws, I'll still be part of the executive board, which is awesome, because the state board member should be a ex officio member. That has been true for years. What I do not think is a good thing is for people to have an abundance of titles. I don't think it is physically or metaphorically possible to wear a bunch of hats well, as evidenced by the fact that the state board meeting moved today at the last minute and I needed to be here. So we typically have elections in the spring. Last spring, we did a survey because the pandemic had just hit, and we had never had virtual elections. We don't know how to have virtual elections. And I don't know of anyone in Ward 7, at least, who has had virtual elections. But we also didn't expect the pandemic. Who knew that we would still be in the pandemic? When we released the survey, we asked people, would they prefer to wait until we got out of the pandemic and have in-person elections as we always do? Or should we go ahead and do virtual elections? That was March, I think, when we did that survey, and we were at 50-50. We literally were at 50-50. And so we said, okay, we'll wait. What we're going to do now, because we didn't have elections in the spring, is we're going to convene an ad hoc committee to make a recommendation to the board around how to move forward with virtual elections, because somebody has to figure out the how to do that. We will ask, like, we're asking for volunteers now. We'll also just put out a call to see if people are interested in helping with that. But that way we can come up with a plan for how to have virtual elections before, sorry, my dog is losing his mind, before assembling the nominating committee, so we can have elections in the spring. And that way we can present to everyone how we'll move forward and have a plan for moving forward before we get into the who is in those seats. I want to stop because I said a lot, and see if there are any questions around that, and also ask the exec board members if I missed anything. Any questions?
So are we taking volunteers today for the ad hoc committee?
I would love volunteers. I want volunteers to know what they're getting into. So that's why I asked if there are any questions first. Oh, Allison, I can't unmute you. Hi, Allison.
Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. Just a quick question. Which are the offices that would be up for election? That's all. And I'll say, I don't know if I can do the ad hoc committee, but I'll volunteer to be on the nominating committee again.
Awesome. So we, I guess technically, if we had the elections in the spring, the full board would be up for election, with the exception of appointed seats, because we didn't have elections this past spring. We typically stagger our board, which is why that was a great question, Allison. And the pandemic hit us literally right before it was time for us to have elections. So we would have to have elections for all positions. Sharice, do you want me to unmute you? So I'll read the question in the chat. Has there been any discussion on updating the org's bylaws relative to the pandemic and its impacts on education moving forward in the District of Columbia? We have not talked about updating our bylaws for the pandemic specifically. There hasn't been too much in our bylaws that has prevented us from operating. No. Is there a suggestion? Or is there something of particular concern?
No, not at this present time, but I thought I would ask the question since the discussion was relative around the bylaws and what has the council, the Education Council discussed going forward, because it doesn't seem like there's going to be an end to this anytime in the near future, even with the vaccines. So if the organization is looking at moving forward, not just the educational realm, but in terms of what will the organization's bylaws reflect, and what have we learned about the pandemic and its impacts on education, and how will that also parlay into the bylaws and how the organization operates going forward. So it's more of a general question, but specifically what we are learning in light of the pandemic, and how those impacts are going to be articulated in how we continue as an organization.
Thanks. So I'll say that one of the things that is, I don't think it's luck, I guess I'm grateful for, is that our bylaws actually do allow us to like make decisions virtually. So like we have it built in that like the board can make a decision via email. There's nothing saying like we have that we have to meet in person. It just says we have to hold a meeting. So we've still been able to operate. As far as the elections, we also had the ability as a board, and it was built into the bylaws, to make a decision about what to do with the elections. Like there was a clause or something. And I don't have them up in front of me, so I don't want to say word from word, but it was something that said like we can make a decision in the event of like emergency or something like that. So that's why we did the survey, because we wanted our decision to be as informed by the body as possible, as far as what we could and should do. We didn't know, we assumed, and we actually talked with some other Ward 7 civic organizations too, to see what other people were doing. And some other people also delayed their elections, assuming that in the fall, we would be able to have elections. And so we did the best we could with that. I don't know if that warrants a bylaw change. I do think that, like I said, we were lucky enough to, or had the foresight enough to know that like we were going to need some flexibility, and grateful to have that flexibility built in, so we weren't completely hamstrung. Yeah. I think the last thing, and Zinga put in the chat, if people want a copy of the bylaws, they can email us at word7ed@yahoo.com, and we share them. Oh, yes, I can.
Hi, I just wanted to chime in. We can certainly take Sharice's comments back to the executive committee, but I don't think, I mean, we were really intentional with our last bylaws revision, that we wanted the bylaws to give direction into how we operate, but that did give us as much flexibility as possible. So while I don't think it's necessarily, I can't imagine how we would, I mean, there are lots of considerations for the pandemic in terms of how our schools operate, what our kinds of priorities are as an organization. So I think that there are a lot of impacts. It's not apparent to me how there would be necessarily any impacts in the bylaws, perhaps aside from adding some specific stipulation for virtual elections. But even that might be a little too specific. So we can certainly take that back to the executive committee. But generally speaking, I don't think that there's much impact of the pandemic on the bylaws, but even though it certainly will impact our priorities moving forward.
Other questions or comments? Going once, twice. Got you.
Is there currently a budget for running a virtual election?
Not currently. I have no, we have no idea what or if there would be cost. And so I think that's some of the things we would want the committee to make a recommendation around. And yes, I see Marla. I'll unmute Marla next. We are aware that, like, I think DC for Democracy had virtual officer elections. Yeah, I think DC for Democracy had virtual elections, and Laura's a member, and she said they used some software that worked out well. So I know that there are things that are out there. Laura was the only person who had had an experience with that. And so we're asking actually the committee to come back to us with a recommendation around the how, which would also be like if it's going to cost, or if there's a cap number of people, or, you know, like those, the literally like the how do we do it, the logistics of it. Okay, Marla said they had one with her sorority. And so we're looking for people to, you know, rub their brains together and tell us, how do we do it? I'm going to next, if you don't have anything else, Kareem.
In light of what Sharice said, I'm just wondering, and you also indicated, Ebony, that the entire board would roll over this year because of we usually try and stagger. Is that something we want to discuss? Do we want the entire board? Are we going to make an adjustment? Because it seems like if we do that from now on, then the board will always roll over in its entirety. So just want us to consider that in light of Sharice's comment.
Yeah, I think that's something to have a conversation about it, and it's an important consideration. One option might be, and I think we did this with our first election. The reason our entire board doesn't turn over at the same time is because we have 2-year terms. And with those 2-year terms, we always want to make sure that there's at least half of the board that knew what was happening last time. And so I think our first election, we had half of the board have a 1-year term and half of the board have a 2-year term, like the positions. But yes, it's something that should be considered. Other questions or comments? Because this is good feedback. We've never been through a pandemic before.
I guess you could go back to the officers that were up for election or were supposed to be up for election the last time we were supposed to have it.
What do you mean? Go back to them?
We were supposed to have elections when in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So certain offices were up for election then, right?
Yeah, so half the board was up for election then. We asked of the current members who were up, would they be willing to continue to serve? And so I believe those offices were, I know the vice chair was one, the vice chair, let me not lie. I know it was the vice chair, and I think, sorry.
Could you have the same offices up this time so that it'll still be staggered?
Maybe. But I think those are things that we could figure out, like a committee could figure out. Other things. If not, I'm going to ask if anyone is interested in helping us figure this out. Yes. Thank you, Kareem. Anyone else? Sharona and Erica. So I have Kareem, Sharona, and Erica who have volunteered. And then I think I heard Allison say she would be willing to serve on a nominations committee again. Marla, is that a nomination of Sharice? And if so, Sharice, do you accept? Because you had some good points.
I'm sorry, what is the nomination for? I need to be clear on what the nomination's for.
I think Marla just nominated you to help figure out how to do virtual elections for the ad hoc committee.
Oh, sure. That's fine. I can help with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Brittany said she would be learning. Does that mean you'd be willing to participate? Yes, Brittany will help. So we have 5. And and an unhelpful shit too in the background. So we have 5. That's a pretty good number. If there are other people who would like to volunteer, please let us know. And Zinga put the email in the chat. That's by far the best way to get a hold of us as volunteer people. Or bark at me. That's also a great way to get a hold of me. Hey, quiet. So we have a couple people who have volunteered. The last thing that is like a businessy thing that Nzinga has reminded me to make an announcement about is Yahoo listservs. We no longer have a Yahoo listserv because no one has a Yahoo listserv. They have shut that down. I know that some people have been getting our meeting announcements through the Yahoo listservs. We have not yet set up a Google listserv, but we can if that's something that is helpful to people. Yeah, if that's something that's helpful to people. Also, if you're a person who is used to getting our emails through the Yahoo listserv, please either email us at word7@yahoo.com or drop their email in the chat so we can make sure you're added to our email list because essentially we're forwarding you an email from our email list via the listserv. And Zinga, did I miss anything?
No, that's everything. I mean, what we have been using a hybrid of Yahoo Mail and the Yahoo listserv and the MailChimp. So now we're down in the MailChimp. And we're going to try and figure out if there's a way to download access to all of the emails that we had. Yahoo claims they sent an announcement. I don't remember reading it, but that's water under the bridge now. So if we can, ideally, we'll find a way to download all that data and extract it before it's gone in perpetuity. But in the interim, if you're used to getting emails from us through the listserv, or if you know anyone who said they used to get emails and they've been dropped off, please encourage them to email us again. Apologize on our behalf, and we'll definitely add folks to our MailChimp.
Thank you. I'm gonna open us up for announcements for a few minutes until Councilmember Henderson joins us. I want to see, does anyone have any announcements? I know we have a bunch of school leaders on the call.
Good evening, everybody. This is Abdul Kareem Ewing Boyd from around the corner, but then also from the Elsie Whitlow Stokes Community Freedom Public Charter School East End campus. We will be having an open house this Saturday at 10 o'clock via Zoom. Registration is easily done at our website, which is ewstokes.org. I'm putting that into the chat right now. It'll be the first thing that pops up when you go to the website to be able to register. We are going into our 4th year, and so we will have classes from pre-K 3 up till 3rd grade open. We are the only language immersion public charter school on this side of the river that has Spanish and French. I'm very excited that Dr. Smith is on here, who will be able to talk about her new language immersion charter school over here on this side of the river. I'm glad to know that she's over here and we're going to be able to serve children in collaboration. And also through our partnership with Joyful Food Market, the Capital Area Food Bank, and Martha's Table, we will be able to do grocery distributions for any household that has a child 18 or under who is a resident of the district. Not tomorrow, but the following Friday, and then 2 Fridays after that. So again, that is on Friday the 15th and Friday the 29th, starting at 2 o'clock. And we will distribute bags of groceries until we run out. So if you have a child 18 years or younger in your household, or if you know folks who have children 18 or younger in their household, please let them know. We will be distributing in the parking lot. We are in that shared building along with Maya Angelou Public Charter School and ourselves, Stokes School on East Capitol. And the entrance to the parking lot is on the back on, Lord, I haven't been driving around and I can't remember the name of that street now.
Lane?
Yes,
Okay.
that's it. So the entrance to the parking lot is back there. Just come on in. And the focus is definitely on making sure that the kids get fed. But if you got old folks in the house and no kids, I'm not gonna card you for babies. I want people to eat. So, but please, let's focus on the kids. Let the kids get in there. Let folks with children come through and get food first. But if you're hungry, I'm gonna give you food. I'll just apologize to the folks at Capital Area Food Bank later. So those are my two announcements. Thank you, everybody, for the continued support of educators. I can't tell you the number of times I've gotten positive feedback from folks in the community about the ways that we're trying to support children, and it means a lot. Thank you very much for supporting the teachers and for supporting the staff at the schools around the ward.
Thank you. I saw, Allison hit me in the chat, so she's next for announcements, and I saw Natalie put her hand up, so we're going to go to Allison and then Natalie.
Hi, everyone. You can hear me, right? Okay. Hi. So a lot of people know that I started a new job and a new position. So I'm actually now at the Department of Energy and Environment doing equity and community engagement work. And so one of the things that I'm trying to support there is DOEE does actually have funds and grant programs to support outdoor learning and outdoor education. Thank you. And so between DOEE and there's also sort of a community coalition that is formed that's really looking at trying to get district resources to support outdoor learning and outdoor education. And that includes funds for DCPS and charter schools to actually build out outdoor classroom infrastructure. So between DOEE and also community work, the what do we call ourselves, Scott? DC Coalition on Equitable Outdoor Education. Calm down a minute. All right. So the long story short, we are actually looking for school leaders who would be interested at the very least in just responding to some surveys and some questions about what would you be interested in particular for your school community. So I will put my email in the chat, and this is across the city. I'm particularly focused on 7 and 8, but if you are interested as school leaders in outdoor learning, just what that could look like and where you can actually get support for it and resources, then please contact me so I can put you in touch with the right folks, and we can add you to our outreach list.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to unmute you, Natalie, and then I'm going to go to Sharice.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Ebony Rose, and thank you for the shout out, Abdul Kareem. I love that we are all in partnership here to serve our children east of the Anacostia River. So as you all know, we Global Citizens Public Charter School will be opening its doors in fall 2021, located in Ward 7 at the Friendship Collegiate Campus. We'll have our own wing for elementary school. We're opening with pre-K 3 and pre-K 4, and we're the first school in the district to offer young children a public charter school to open, offering Mandarin, Chinese, and Spanish. And definitely excited about the fact that we get to open that in Ward 7 so that we can serve our children. I'm really excited to announce that we are again offering virtual language classes coming up. The last day to register is today, but I will be checking it all the way until tomorrow morning before we confirm everyone participating. We are offering language classes in Spanish and Mandarin on Saturdays coming up, starting on January 23rd and going through February 27th. And the classes will be there's a time slot at 11 and a time slot at 12. And based on, we only have 20 slots, but 30 people have signed up already. So it's not too late though, because what I'm trying to do is open another section because families really want it. And the preference is for families living east of the Anacostia River. And so as you all may know, that we started the Capitol View Neighborhood Library over a year ago, just offering classes for families. And so now because of the pandemic, we're offering them virtually. We started with Mandarin Chinese because it wasn't yet a language offered east of the river. And then so we have been in partnership and having discussions, and we hope to eventually, open a middle and a high school with languages, LC with Stokes, and some others in collaboration. But I'm really excited to offer the classes. But we also have an open house. It won't interrupt with LC Whitlow Stokes open house. We have it at 11 o'clock on Saturdays for any prospective families that want to learn more about our school model and learn more about our school. So I'll just drop the link to our website in the chat, and I'll also just drop the link directly to sign up for the classes, and then also to sign up for the open house in the chat once I'm done. But just wanted to share that announcement with everyone. Oh, the name of the school, thank you. I might have missed that, is Global Citizens Public Charter School. We received, I mentioned that we will be located in the Friendship Collegiate campus, just in case everybody doesn't, it's right across from Minnesota Avenue. And that's where we plan to open in fall. And we'll be opening again with pre-K 3 and pre-K 4. And I have my director of operations, Sean, and our new founding principal, Giselle Allen, who is a Ward 7 resident, with us this evening. And so thank you all for allowing us to make that announcement.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
I think I said Sharice, and then Philip, and Brittany, I saw a hand. Let me know if you meant to lower it or not.
Thank you. This is just really quick. For those that may be on the line that have relatives or someone that's a McKinley Tech student, we are having our first reopen walkthrough, facilities readiness walkthrough on Monday, the 25th of January, to review logistics and how phase 3 will begin for students that will be returning. We're not mandating that all students return. Most are, being a tech school, many are very comfortable with the virtual learning, but as we all know, everyone is not necessarily, it's not working for everyone. So those students at McKinley who have failed at least one class or more, the reopening efforts will be targeted to those students. And we have, I think, 60 freshmen and 22 sophomores, 15 juniors, and 12 seniors. So those are our numbers for reopening on the 25th. Well, not on the 25th, but in the first week of February, which is the phase 3 reopening. So I wanted to make sure that that was out. And then we'll be able to share logistics on how to reopen safely and with tech-driven technologies to assist. And I think that would be good information for other schools to adapt best practices, because this has been a very hot topic among all of the city schools, DCPS and DC public schools and public charter schools. So I think for the most part, we'll be issuing a report, and I will bring that back to the Ward 7 Education Council. So if it can help others in the other school districts, it'll be available for best practice and reference. So that's it for that.
Awesome, thank you. I have Philip. Brittany told me that was technical difficulties. And I think right now, that's the last announcement in my queue.
All right. Hello again, everybody. My name is Philip Copeland. I'm working with the Office of the Student Advocate. Renata Landreau is also on here from our office. If you're unfamiliar with us, our purpose is to assist families navigating public or charter schools in the district. So first of all, I just want to say, if you know any families that have any issues whatsoever, have any confusion, our office is a resource. I just wanted to highlight in particular, couple projects that we're working on. One in particular in Ward 7 has been around safe passage and student safety, traveling to or from school. Right before the pandemic broke out, literally the day before, we were in the process of surveying students across the district just about their experiences traveling. We had to cut it. Obviously, school closures took place. We just finalized our report for that. We spoke with over 450 students across all 8 wards, just on their experiences in general. This year, we are looking, obviously, student safety looks different with the pandemic taking place and virtual learning happening, but we still need to, I guess, max or vocalize their experiences that they have in order to make recommendations for better policies down the road. If you are a school leader, if you work with a group of students in the district, if you have ideas on what experiences should be highlighted, please get in contact with me. I'll put my contact info in addition to the link for our report that we just put out.
Kimball, hold on. Dabney, you got in. Where is Dabney? Principal Dabney.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick ask. Kimball has had a STEM fair for the last 5 school years where we invite different organizations into our school to do booths where they show how science comes alive in their work. We've had lawyers come in for patent law, DJs with music, like all of the above. With the change, we've lost a lot of our participants due to COVID, but this is still something we're trying to get off in the month of May. We've pushed it back. We typically have it in April. So just reaching out to different resources that if you know any company, organization, club, individual that's either based in the sciences or, you know, some way can relate their work to the sciences. If you can contact me, I'll put my email in the chat box so that I can get in contact with that organization or club so that we can continue to have like a robust STEM program here. It's something our students really look forward to and actually like have been asking us when we're going to have it this year. So we're trying to find a way to make sure we still get it off the ground amidst this pandemic and all that's happening.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Principal Dabney. I see that Councilmember Henderson has joined us. One final announcement, we sent it out in our, and plug, we sent it out in our email, but if you have these things, send them to us because we like to include them. And Zinga does a great job of sending out updates. So if there are things that are like, you know, walkthroughs, I think Kareem, you sent us yesterday, the open house, if there are open houses, if there are other things, please send them to us because we want to make sure we share them with as many people as possible. I do not have the link for this. I'm not going to drop it in the chat, but it did go out in the email. The William O. Lockridge Foundation is looking for a young adult board member. So if you know young people who are 18 to 26, I think it's 18 and 26, they are looking for a young adult board member. I'm sure that's a wonderful experience, and they're inviting people to apply. So we'll continue to include that until the deadline passes, which I think is January 18th. So I am going to turn it over to Councilmember Henderson, who I'm going to ask to unmute and introduce, or I guess reintroduce herself because she's been with us before.
Ebony Rose, thank you so much for the invitation to join you all. Good evening, everyone. So for some of you haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is Christina Henderson, one of your new at-large council members. This is day 4, which is kind of crazy because I feel like this is one of the wildest first weeks of a person's job that you could possibly have, especially being in sort of the virtual environment as well. But I'm excited about the work ahead. Even though we have to sort through some other things with our partners here in the District of Columbia. I've been to the Ward 7 Education Council before. My previous role used to serve as the committee director for the Committee on Education, back when Councilmember Grasso was the chair of the Committee on Education. I left that, and for the last 4 years, I've actually been working on Capitol Hill. I was handling education, labor, postal, and census issues for Senator Chuck Schumer before being elected. As most of you, well, as all of you know now, there is no standalone committee for the council for this next council period. So all 13 council members are responsible for education, as it will be in the committee of the whole. That was something that I tried to use the little bit of time that I did have with Chairman Mendelson to advocate against, because I did feel like where we were in the education space, given the pandemic, but also where we need to go in terms of recovering from the significant amount of learning loss that students are facing this year. I felt that we needed a standalone committee in order to continue to probe and ask questions in that way. And so clearly that didn't happen. So in my role as an at-large member, I think you all should just know that education will be a focus of mine, even though there is no standalone committee in that regard. Prior to working for the council, I also spent some time at DCPS. And then before that, also worked for the New York City Department of Education, and did some consulting with several other school districts. So I do have a background in education work. And one of the reasons I decided I wanted to run for the council was to truly focus in on equity in the ways that I felt that I was not seeing, not just from an education standpoint, but just from an opportunity for success, access to success, and how we grow and sustain ourselves here in the district for future generations going forward. Currently I am serving on the Committee on Health, the Committee on Transportation and the Environment, the Committee on Labor and Workforce, and the Committee on Government Operations, as well as the Special Committee on Redistricting. So there are some overlapping work, most certainly in terms of the education space, but just overlapping work in all the things that impact young people, working families, and teachers across the district, from transportation to even the questions around redistricting, which might feed into future conversations around school assignment policies, et cetera. So let's see. Should I stop there, Ebony, Rose, and we'll get into some questions, or happy to field any questions y'all might have?
I'm sure people do have questions. So the raise your hand function has been working pretty well. I see Rebecca's already on it. Commissioner Morris.
Hi, Christina. It seems like your plate is kind of full, and I wanted to know, like, how would you be able to balance and pull in the education part with all that you have to do, and especially when a lot of the schools in East of the River, they're falling behind, and it's been falling behind. It's actually been behind in a lot of ways for decades. And so what is your plan to actually to be very inclusive when it comes down to education, and especially getting the council to be very inclusive when it comes down to education, so it doesn't continuously fall behind, especially during this pandemic, where we do see students falling behind tremendously just due to curriculum. The curriculum has just been, I don't want to say, it's half A. So what is your plan to make sure everything's inclusive and everything is on par for standards?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So there are a couple of different ways that can go from there. I view education as not just something that is siloed, right? So it's not just something that the education agencies in particular are responsible for. And I've also already started raising some questions, particularly from the health perspective, around, what are we doing around school reopening stuff in terms of COVID-19, but also, the plans for teachers to be able to receive the vaccinations in phase 1B, and not just teachers, but I also raised the question around high school students who are over the age of 16, who technically could be in that eligible pool for receiving some of the approved vaccinations that have already taken place. Yes, there's a lot of different issues that are certainly going on, but education has always been a priority of mine. And I have a really good so far, I have a really good working relationship with Chairman Mendelson in terms of, pushing on these particular education issues. And I think for the conversations that I've had with my colleagues thus far, for many of them, they recognize that I actually have a little bit more knowledge than maybe some of them do around the inner workings of the very convoluted system that we currently have in place here in the district. One of the things that has been super important to me is around the inclusivity around voices. And so one of the things I'll be pushing Chairman Mendelson, and we're actually, I think, the committee directors and chiefs of staff were having a meeting on that today around how we schedule even for performance oversight. Because there was since everything kind of moved in the pandemic, they only wanted to do one committee hearing at a time, which meant that you only get maybe a 2 or 3 hour window for you to conduct your business, even though that wouldn't allow for 1, all voices to be heard, and 2, for you to get all the information that you're looking for. But I've always been one of, if you want people to really be able to participate, why would we have an education hearing at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday when class is supposed to be taking place? Why wouldn't you do an education hearing after hours so that teachers, faculty, and families that are working can actually participate in the process? Are those not the voices that we want to hear? So I'll be trying to take it from a different approach in order to be able to include those folks in. But I can assure you that even with my work on the other committees, education, and wherever those linkages may be, labor, workforce, et cetera, that we can do that work as well. Thanks for that question.
All right, I'm going to Laura.
Hello.
Hi.
I guess, my question is going to be on reopening. So, February 1 is coming up and the metrics are worse than they ever have been. And yet DCPS is insisting that every single school open up with 25% of their students being served. And at a lot of schools, that's meaning 75 to 80% of the staff are getting called up. Like, we're getting letters starting tomorrow. I know I'll be called up tomorrow. And we're just kind of at a loss. So I guess as a council member, like, how do you plan to help make sure that any reopening plan is safe? Be it if February 1st, mid-February, like whenever it is DCPS does it, how are we going to hold DCPS accountable to what they say? And also, at some point, someone's got to put a community spread metric on there and say there's a line, and no one's putting a number up. And we know this is higher than anything that we've ever had. So, the line's definitely not up here. But I guess kind of, what do you see your role in all of this reopening discussion as on the council?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So, you say a reopening plan. I haven't actually seen a plan yet. So I'm really trying to work on that part. I'm looking ahead at right past my computer right now, because this is where I have a calendar that's right here, and I'm like sort of checking down the days of, we are approximately 3 weeks from February 1st, and I don't feel like there hasn't actually been any communications around what is supposed to happen on day 1 or week 1 for that matter. What are the protocols in place? What are the procedures in place? Just dates. By this day you will know X. By this day you will know Y. But then also, what is the communication part going to be part of it. So there have been several people who have asked on social media and other platforms, you know, Christina, you have a young daughter. If she was a little bit older, would you be sending her back at this point? And my daughter is currently back in daycare. So she is in a setting with other children and teachers, et cetera, that she is there for, you know, several hours a day. But the protocols have been different. At least there are protocols in place. And one of the things that makes me feel comfortable and confident in sending her in every day, though they were closed today because it's on Capitol Hill, so she's going back tomorrow, but is that we have transparent communication, right? So every morning as a parent, I am responsible for sending in a daily health screen to say that, no, she doesn't have a runny nose. No, she doesn't have a temperature check. No, there's no one in my household who is waiting on a COVID test. There's no one in my household who's tested positive or who is under quarantine, et cetera. And if there is anyone in the building who doesn't pass that health screen, we all get an email, not with the name of the person, but just the information that says someone didn't pass the health screen today. They are in this particular class, so that you can make a decision as a parent of whether or not you feel comfortable or confident sending your child in that day. And then we get an email at the resolution of it. A COVID test was administered and it came back negative, or they talked to a doctor and the doctor said it was something X, right? I feel like this is the type of communication that's going to be necessary for families to feel confident, but also for staff members to feel confident as well. I've been hearing reports of like, yeah, there will be a positive test at a campus, but the school community is not informed of it until 10 to 13 days after the fact, which is unacceptable. But to get to your point around, you know, what the role of the council is in this regard, I honestly believe it is around pushing for transparency and information, and not letting up in terms of the pressure. Because I have heard in some of the rhetoric from the chancellor's office of making it sound as though the people who are asking questions are somehow unreasonable. Not unreasonable about my child's health, not unreasonable about my child's safety. I just want to know. And then I can make an informed decision in the same manner that we all look at data, read things, and we make an informed decision. I haven't had an opportunity to chat with DCPS since I have been in this role. I'm thinking in my head, no, that hasn't happened yet. But I would hope to make that happen within the next week, because I do feel like there's some things that need to be put on the record, but also that just need to be pushed and asked. Because if you tell people what the plan is on January 29th, you can't get mad when families get upset and don't show up on February 1st. And then say that this was somehow some magical sabotage. It wasn't. You sabotaged yourself. I hope that answers your question. I feel like it's going to be a fluid situation. And you know, to your second part, I do feel like there needs to be some metrics. At what point do we shut it down? And I haven't heard anything about that. New York had metrics. Even the UK has metrics, right? So any of these jurisdictions that have opened and have been serious about handling the pandemic have had some type of metric before. So yeah.
All right. I want to read a comment from Allison. She said, not to interrupt, but I think it's worth noting that other school districts have found that parents willingly sent sick kids to school because they needed or wanted to. I know some people have said they don't see the raise your hand function. If you don't see the raise your hand function and you want to get in the queue, just say, I want to get in the queue in the chat, and we'll put you in the queue. I did mute everybody because the background noise gets crazy. So I don't want to just unmute everybody, but I'll unmute you when it's your turn.
Marla showed me where.
I think Vanola was next. Vanola, I'm going to lower your hand. Vanola was next. And then I have Joanna.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Marla helped me with the raise hand function. I never would have guessed it was there. Okay, so I just have a very simple question that I always ask. What is your position on mayoral control of education?
Yes. So I feel like DC has one of the more extreme versions of mayoral control where there is no check or balance at all. The other system that I am more familiar with in terms of mayoral control is New York City. However, when they switched to mayoral control, they didn't completely get rid of their school board. They changed it. It's not an elected body. However, it is a body that has the approval of contracts. They also have the approval of school assignment. They have the approval of any new school openings or closures. They also deal with any personnel, contract disputes, etc. And I actually find that to be very helpful in that not only do, labor, workforce, teachers, etc., have some place to go, but also for families have another outlet. If you're not getting what you need from central office, you do have another place that you can go that does have oversight. It also forces the system to be very proactive in terms of communication. You can't wait to the last minute to do X, Y, or Z because you actually need the approval of that body before something can actually move forward. And I do feel like DC would very much benefit from an additional check on the system that we currently have in place. Now, I'm not one at this point to say we need to go all the way back to an elected school board. And part of that is just around the functionality of budget. I sort of tried my best to become a student of the history of DC. I've read a lot of the transcripts from past council hearings when there was an elected school board in place. And let's just say the system was not as resourced as it should have been at that time. And a lot of it was around council members not necessarily feeling like they had a responsibility to do that part because you did have an elected school board. I'm open to change on that, but that's kind of where I am at this point. Just from a budgeting standpoint, unless the school board has the ability to raise revenue on its own, and it wouldn't, I just feel like it sets us up. I know people disagree with that notion, but that's where I am right now.
Right. Okay. So you talked about the role of the school board in New York. So how would you see it functioning here? An elected school.
I'm sorry?
How would you see the elected school board functioning here in the District of Columbia?
So the New York system is not an elected system. They are appointed. They are appointed by the borough presidents, as well as by the mayor's office. And the borough presidents are elected there. So they're like little mini mayors, Brooklyn Borough, Manhattan Borough, et cetera. So I don't know what that, I mean, someone asked me this before. I think it was like Nathan Luking. We went into this on Twitter around like what would be the makeup of how you would select those individuals. I haven't gotten that deep, but I'm just saying, just in general, a body of people for whom have an additional oversight responsibility and say in the decision-making of DCPS.
Right, I didn't mean how you would elect them. You know, I think they should still be elected, but what I was asking is how would you see the school board actually functioning in relation to the mayor and the council, basically?
I think it was, as I described, in terms of that is your approval body. That is your oversight and approval body for contracts, for school assignment, for school closures, for those big, large decisions as it affects the district.
Okay, so similar to the way they operate in New York is what you're saying.
Right. Okay. But we have an additional layer of complication in the district, I feel, in that a lot of our issues have to do with lack of coordination amongst our sectors. So I don't know, I haven't really thought in terms of, but like having a school district that has having an elected school board that has oversight over both public charter schools and DCPS I would need to think about that more because at least in how at least in terms of how people have thought about the elected school board or going back to the elected school board, it was only involving DCPS. And I feel like it doesn't really solve our issue if we're not talking about public charter schools in that same conversation.
They used to have oversight over, but that's okay.
All right.
You said enough. Thank you.
Sounds like we have some hashing out to do. I want to go to Joanna because she was the next person in the queue. And then I want to see, I know Rebecca wanted to get back in the queue. Does anyone else want to get in the queue? I do want to flag it is 7:56. We typically adjourn at 8:15. So it will behoove you now to tell me. I see Paige. Joanna,
I'll speed up my answers.
Joanna, I'm going to unmute you. So I see Joanna, Paige, Delia, Rebecca. Hold on 1 second.
Hi, Councilmember Henderson. I have to get used to saying that. Congratulations. So my question is really thinking about funding, but not funding for facilities or other things, but thinking about equity and funding in a public health emergency. So as you know, I work at Rocketship Public Schools, and in many ways, during this time that we've all been working remotely and our children have been in remote schools, we have been behind the curve, and I'm speaking of charters around testing and other resources that the mayor has made available to think about reopening DCPS. And we've been behind the curve in making it available for public charter schools. And the reason that I find that particularly problematic is because, for instance, our LEA, we have approximately 1,500 Black and brown students, mostly within Ward 7 and 8. And I just want to know from your perspective, one, what does that say about sort of the value that we place on their lives? And then two, what do you think from a legislative perspective that we can do about that?
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. So soon after my election, I had an opportunity to be briefed by the mayor's folks. And sort of, they're like, we're bringing you in to sort of catch you up on the hot topic issues. And, they were fine, they were gracious, et cetera. But there were some noticeable people who were not on the agenda who I thought would be there. One of them being the deputy mayor for education. And so I asked the question of the city administrator around the question of what are we doing in terms of charter schools being able to have access to PPE the joint purchasing of PPE, because I had heard that had been an issue. And I was told at that meeting that there was going to be some type of grant program that was opening up for charter schools to be able to apply for funding around COVID things, whether it be technology, cleaning supplies, X, Y, or Z. That was in November. And then a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with someone at the DC Charter School Board, and apparently that hasn't happened yet. And so that is definitely one of the things and areas of follow-up that I have around, again, what does the coordination look like? Because we know that, or at least some of the charter leaders that I've spoken to, they are, they follow DCPS's lead around opening and closures, et cetera. And so there are a number of charters that are also considering to open in February, but they don't have the resources to be able to do so. And so I feel like this also needs to be part of the conversation as well. So it's definitely something that's on my radar, and that, I'll be pushing to sort of follow up. It was unfortunate that this week's weekly COVID call happened at the same time that everything was going down at the Capitol yesterday. And so it was, people were missing, but also I feel like there wasn't a lot of focus on some of these things. And it's something I want to plan to, bring up in the future. And Laura, I don't know the answer to that, but it is my understanding is that DCPS, or they've told me, has more than enough PPE.
So we, so I was one of the participants on the Mayor's Reopening Committee. I will say that a number of the participants flagged, that was back in the spring, to the DME that they should do joint purchasing. And that was in April. I will say that they did send an email to us as state board members from the DME that OSSI had launched a grant program for charters. I will forward it. So that's happened, but it happened recently because clearly I just became a state board member. So I'm not trying to say it's been out there, but it has now happened.
Okay.
I also want to, I'm going to read Sharice's comment in the chat just to make sure it's seen. And then I want to go to the next person. Sharice noted the coronavirus DC.gov dashboard has for the past month reworked the numbers, meaning the data rendered on the reopening metrics are in retrograde up to 2 weeks of past data. This is highly problematic and what I call a workaround to keep from focusing on real-time data. I attribute this to sidestepping the massive spread of COVID in the city. Technically, November 18th, DC had exceeded the rate of transmission, but did not revert back to phase 1. That's true. In my opinion, we're progressively chasing the curve while the gap gets wider and wider. Parents are concerned, points to consider. I believe the next person in the chat after Joanna was Paige. Where is Paige? There you go.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Henderson, I have concerns. Like, I'm a teacher in Ward 7, and I'm also concerned about learning loss. But it is a little bit of a trigger for me when I hear it. And for a couple of reasons. One, for years, there has been an attendance policy that has basically shifted the responsibility for learning and dealing with trauma onto families. Students are allowed 30 unexcused absences per class. And this has been going on. So people who are saying we have to reopen schools to address learning loss now, where were they when we needed wraparound services and full funding? And so my question is, how will you bring these issues to bear when education has been put into the committee of the whole?
Thanks for that question, Paige. And I just want to say that when I talk about learning loss, it's not necessarily in like as a reason of why we need to reopen schools. I'm sort of thinking about it in terms of what are we going to do in the future around that as well, right? If we're saying summer school or additional tutors or whatever, how are we having that conversation in the budget cycle now for either both the budget for next year, but also for the mayor's supplemental budget for this particular year that is also going to be coming up? Like, how do we move money around to handle those things? So we can't say, oh, we don't have enough money to do additional tutors or X, Y, or Z. But, you know, to answer your question, to be honest, I just plan to be a pest, right? like I said, I have a really good working relationship with the chairman now, but I feel like unless somebody is pushing for the hearings, unless someone is pushing for this to come to the forefront, because there are so many other things that are within the committee of the whole, I share your concern around feeling like this is going to be pushed to the back burner here. And that's one of the reasons why after I was elected, I was, you know, trying to get folks to push for continuing to hold on to a standalone education committee, because I saw it then that I thought he might sweep it into the committee of the whole, given, you know, the new members that were coming on, et cetera. And so I just want to be a drumbeat on this issue. Like I said, I feel like the committee of the whole is the responsibility of everyone. And so all council members need to be held accountable for the conversations going forward, the lack of transparency, and the lack of oversight on this particular issue. No one gets to say, oh, I'm not on that committee. We're all on that committee. So it is a responsibility of everyone. And so when things go left or the ball is dropped, all 13 members are responsible, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe Commissioner Houseville was next. Do you?
Thank you, Ebony. And again, congratulations, Councilmember Henderson. And thank you so much for coming to share your priorities and just an overview of your educational viewpoints. My question is a little bit more broader. Curious to know what are some of your maybe top 2 or 3 educational priorities, let's say maybe throughout the next couple of months or for this first year. I have 3 children in DCPS schools. One is in middle school and the other 2 are in elementary school. And I must admit, I'm extremely concerned about so many areas. It's really hard to kind of pick one. So I think it'd be nice to hear, hearing that you also have little ones, just to hear, what are some of the priorities that you plan to champion through the council?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So one of the first things that I'm focused on, when I was a staffer at the council, we worked on legislation that would require all DCPS and public charter schools to have access to a nurse for full time. The council never funded that legislation, and so we haven't had that yet. But I feel like as part of this conversation around reopening, this is something that needs to be back on the forefront and on the table around having, nursing staffing in the building throughout that time. So that's something that's definitely a priority of mine. Another thing that is going to be a priority of mine as well, and I had conversations with the leadership of the WTU around this, is I have some significant concerns around how the pandemic has impacted high school students, in particular 9th grade students, as well as those in that sophomore, junior range who are in that I could easily drop out and slip out of the system. And we've had a significant amount of focus on our pre-K through 8 population, really our pre-K through 5 population, which I think is important because we know that for those younger students, online learning is a difficult and it's a challenge, but I'm also really curious around how this is going to impact us sort of going long term, especially as far as workforce is concerned. And I'll be honest with you, the attendance policies that they have for high schools right now of you just log into Canvas and that counts as your in-seat attendance is a little unsettling to me because no one is counting who's actually attending classes. So I'm hoping to probe into that a little bit further. And then really a focus around what are we doing in the summer. So these are sort of like the big 3 that I have right now. And then 3, and the 4th is around mental health support for our students. Had a briefing with the DC Hospital Association a little while ago, and the head of Children's Hospital talked about the increased number of cases that they're seeing around eating disorders of young ladies across the district. And I asked about that a little bit further, like, is this food insecurity? What's happening here? And he said, no, it's literally around, one, you have young ladies who are out of their normal routine, no longer around adults who would have caught, hey, you haven't eaten, or hey, you're going to the bathroom at a more frequent clip. But when they have conversations with them, they're learning from these young people, being on camera is really difficult. And they don't like what they see looking at themselves for several hours a day. And just the cases are really, really disheartening. And again, I don't feel like we're doing enough to provide the services here for our young people who are really struggling. They may be okay academically, but they're struggling in their lives. And so I think we need to do some more work there.
I want to go to Commissioner Morris because I think she was next. I also want to do a last call because it is 8:10. And if you are like me, you have been on Zoom for entirely too many hours today. Commissioner Morris, Rebecca.
Okay, I have one more question. This is revolving in the reopening. I have yet to hear anything about OSHA being involved in the reopening, which I believe they should be, especially when we're having a airborne disease. as a person who has worked in the mortuary scene, there is a certain OSHA has like a certain standard when it comes down to the embalming room. And I haven't heard any type of standard when it comes down to the classroom, especially when it comes down to the air breathing, the air circulation. There is an air circulation box, but there isn't necessarily, like, I haven't really seen like anywhere on the internet, like what is the circulation point such and such of droplets that it clears out in the air. I really think that that you guys should have the same standards in which we have for like our embalming rooms should really be for the classrooms, so that the air can circle out. So when will OSHA be involved or taking a walkthrough through our schools? And I would love for the council members to actually take a walkthrough in our schools as well while we're doing the care classes, because even though it said that we're supposed to social distance, if you're working in an elementary school with a bunch of ADHD kids, that's unrealistic. Like, it's just unrealistic. We can't social distance. So when will you guys contact or partner up with OSHA with the help of ready to make sure that the schools are ready for people to actually walk in?
Yeah. So it's interesting that you brought up OSHA, because I only am sort of familiar with them from the federal side, and I can tell you that they have basically been MIA out of this whole pandemic situation. And I suspect that will be the case until January 20th, to be honest with you. I don't know if the local office is a little bit different in terms of that, but we had been calling for not only just standards around that, but also like an emergency temporary standard around workplace safety, which would encompass this, right? Because people who work in those buildings would fall under that umbrella. But that's definitely something that I would look into, because I hadn't even thought about it from that perspective. I just knew that the facility standards, I guess, that DC was going on for their own was a local thing, not necessarily calling in a federal agency for guidance on that, but something to look into. Thanks for that.
Okay. And also, I would love to still see you guys come to DC, the Ward 7, to do a walkthrough while the CARES program is happening, so that you guys can get a better feel of improvements or improve.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So that second part, I'd be more than welcome to do that. Again, I haven't had in my meeting yet with DCPS. I don't know who I'm supposed to, talk to about those particular things. I do know that several council members did walkthroughs. This was prior to the CARES classrooms when they were doing preparation work. I even know that Janice Lewis George, who's a council member on Ward 4, was able to do walkthroughs of all of the Ward 4 schools already. So yeah, I would love to do that. So I'll follow up with DCPS to see if we can get that scheduled.
Thank you. It was nice talking to you.
Thank you.
Last call for the queue. If it's helpful, high schools largely have not had their walkthroughs yet because they were last to reopen. I did. Principal Dabney was kind enough to invite me on the walkthrough for Kimball. And I think Lakeisha was also on that walkthrough from Henderson's office. But many of the high schools have not had their walkthroughs. And so I've seen principals reach out to ask people to come. I have not seen a bunch of initiative from DCPS to encourage others to participate in walkthroughs. Last call, questions, comments. I only know of Gray going on the Smothers walkthrough. I don't know anything else. And I know that because I saw it happen. Last call, questions, comments, concerns, Q. All right. Renetta, you have the last question.
Hello, everyone. How are you all doing tonight? My question for you tonight was, within this pandemic, we know that our students' mental health has been affected in so many different ways. Is there any plan that you have or any ideas that you have bringing to the council on how we can better support student mental health as we move either continue within virtual learning or move towards going back to in-person learning?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So one of the things that I'm having conversations with folks about is how we activate and use telehealth more to be able to provide services to students, not just those who have IEPs or who are already on the radar of social workers or guidance counselors because of some particular case, but that to make it accessible and available to any student who is feeling like they need to have a conversation with someone who is not their parent or who is in their building. I know that other jurisdictions have been able to do this successfully by partnering up with some organizations to, provide access to providers. But this also requires the ability of a young person to have access to a device and have access to a safe space that can be quiet, where they feel like they have a sense of privacy and can be open in that regard. But I feel like, even if we reopen schools, this is an option that we need to have on the table for young people because virtual learning is going to be a part of our situation and system, I feel like, for the foreseeable future. And so that's something that I want to look at in terms of how do we make this available, not just through an IEP or social service process, but, in the same way that, we as adults could call up a hotline or a service or something like that, what is the ways in which we can make that available to young people without them necessarily having to go through their parents for access through insurance? Thanks for your question. And Ebony Rose, can I just say, thank you all for the invitation. My email is now live for the council. I'm c.henderson@dccouncil.us. And my staff's emails should be on the website, hopefully by tomorrow. They just got access to their emails as well. Please feel free to reach out to my office with any questions or concerns that you have. Anytime you wanted to invite us to be a part of a conversation, come to an event, go see something at a particular school. I just want to underscore that because in a virtual environment, whether it be DCPS or public charter schools, it's council members can't just pop up like we would normally do in a school environment. But also it's harder for us to know what's really going on inside the school environment because everything is virtual. And so we really do rely on families to be able to be eyes and ears and letting us know, "Aw, hi, little one," to let us know. So anyway, Ebony Rose, thank you so much again. This will not be the last time. Please invite me in the future.
Thank you. We'll definitely have you back. We'll definitely see you on the dais. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We will post the recording to the meeting on YouTube so that other people can also benefit from both the announcements people share and the wonderful questions people asked. And again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And I want to make sure that we adjourn so we can, do some things non-virtually. Thank you all. Have a good evening, and we will see you in February. Bye. Bye. Hi, Alice.